Hello everyone and welcome to the Hobby Guard. In today's video we will be saying goodbye to Warhammer and we'll be saying hi to Toonhammer. As we discussed today, the recent changes in tone that have happened in the world of Warhammer 40,000. Specifically, I won't get too much into Age of Sigmar or Old World or Fantasy, because basically the only thing I know about that world is the Felix and Gotrek books that I've read, which again I love, but it's not my specialty. We are specifically gonna be talking about Warhammer 40,000 and the changes in tone, both in art and in the stories and in the models and in the company itself, that I've noticed in the last few years. Now, obviously, I'm neither the first person to notice or the one with the most experience in this hobby to talk about this stuff. There are other people that have talked about it in depth, but I want to share my own point of view as a person who has created a ton of fan art for Warhammer. You know, if you take a look at the sort of things that I draw, you can probably realize that my inspirations are a lot more Grimdark, a lot more old school, and the sort of art and tone that I appreciate. So yeah, I've talked at length about all my Warhammer fan art so far, but just in case you're interested in seeing more of it, feel free to go down in the description below. I will leave a link to my art Instagram. I am not a professional artist, but I'm showing you this mainly to show you that I'm not just someone who complains about stuff. I also like to add to it. So in this video I will be addressing some of those issues and how to help them. As a hobbyist, I think it's also a responsibility to help the hobby. And how do we help our hobby? How do we keep our hobby healthy and safe? Well, again, we don't share the whole responsibility, obviously, but we share part of it. So all of this to say, this is not just a wow, Warhammer is no longer the way it was, or wow, Warhammer is not the way I like it to be kind of complaining video. I will be addressing some of the things that I considered issues in the change of tone, but if you want to get if you want a deeper look into all the corporative changes behind the decisions that the company has been taking as of late, I highly recommend you to check a channel called Northern Exile. This person was actually a Games Workshop store manager for a few years, as I understand it, and he has great insights in all of that. I'm a huge fan of his channel, so I highly recommend it. I highly recommend you to check it. But again, I will just be giving my point of view as someone who is fell completely in love with the weirdness and the grimdarkness of Warhammer. And you can still find it today in some novels, in even some of the animation projects that they have in Warhammer Plus. But realistically, I've noticed more and more how it's been fading away, and it is extremely easy to just look at the cover art of the more recent novels and just look how cartoonish they look, specifically compared to previous cover art from previous novels, right? I mean, this is not all novel covers, but these are works from Adrian Smith, I believe. Yeah, this has got to be Adrian Smith. And just look at the difference. Just look at the difference in it's not about skill, okay? I don't want to be crapping on any specific authors or artists, because, you know, the company hires them for a reason, and it's very hard when you get hired as an artist because, well, you assume that the company already knows what you can do, and, you know, they give you a few guidelines and they give you free reign. So I'm not bashing on the artist, okay? I'm only criticizing perhaps the changes in the company. Compare this style of artwork, this style of art, and the theme that this brings. Think of all the complexity in the stories. People say don't judge a book by its cover. I think that's BS. I think you should absolutely judge a book by its cover, because let's say that this was the cover of a book. Actually, there's a description here. It says claustrophobia is obviously not an issue in the year 40,000, which I find hilarious. Anyways, if someone, let's say this was a cover of a book, it's not, but let's say that it was. If someone takes this amount of dedication and invest so much time and effort into all this detail on a book cover, imagine the type of story that they will tell, right? Because normally it takes longer to write a book than to make a painting, even although with a painting like this I have no clue if this would actually take longer than a novel. Some of the novels that GW has been more recently writing, at the very least. But yeah, I think you should definitely judge a book, by its cover in many ways. Specifically in Warhammer, it tends to be very accurate. Like some of the stories, most of the stories actually, I haven't read because the book cover is not attractive to me at all. Like, look at that. To me, that feels like that is from the back of a cereal box. Honestly. Where is the grim darkness in these? Where is the... Again, I'm not criticizing the artists. They were clearly given some guidelines. But even like the design of the character itself, because obviously this is Inquisitor Cotis, I think. So he even has a miniature, which I really, really don't like, specifically compared to the older one. And I haven't read this story, but I'm not enticed whatsoever to read it. Now, I know that there is a thing called Warhammer Adventures, which tells stories for a younger audience, and I am not criticizing that. And you know, I also want to make give an example for this cover for this book. This is not nearly as cartoonish as the other ones. This is clearly a bit more detailed. The lightning in this gives you an aura of mystery, of darkness, of something lurking in the shadows, of weird energies. you know, that green glow in the background gives it some weird energy. But and again, this story I did actually read and I am actually enjoying. I didn't think this story was cartoonish or anything, perhaps a bit dry in tone, but I do actually have a review on this book on my channel and a deep dive into the book. So if you want to know my precise opinion on this book, you can go and check my past videos. But I almost don't read this book because the art, it looks way too clean to me. Again, let's compare it to some old art, and it always feels a bit unfair, to just compare different artists. But you can tell to an extent the purpose of the book, the objective of the book, based off of the art. Now, this art, you could argue, the proportions of the characters look cartoonish, and I would agree. But you can tell that this is not meant to be cartoonish. Perhaps the characters look greater than life. They look absurd. They look almost like a satire. At the same time, they're made and presented with extreme care and detail, and everything feels intentional in here and complex. And this gives me the vibe of a story that it is very complex. Obviously, again, I don't think this is a cover for a book. This is random work from the Warhammer days. If this was a cover for a book, I would think this is a very complex story, not boring at all, because, you know, the characters, the fact that just going off of their proportions, you can tell that this is gonna be an action-filled book. But if it was a book cover, right? Again, I think the art is a great example of how even the tone of the stories has been changing. Look at these warp demons here. What looks to be in the background like a Cornite, like a Cornite's demons. Yeah, you can see them here. I don't know too much about demons and their types, but I know these are Slaneshi and this is a Corn demon as well. I think this looks terrifying, but also very heavy metal. You know, it's clearly not supposed to be like, oh, you're supposed to be scared by this. No, this is clearly presenting a vibe of very metal, a lot of violence, a lot of brutality, but at the very least it's meant to be taken seriously, right? If this was the cover of a very heavy like thrash metal band, it would feel right at home, right? Let's look at some other stuff here. Yeah, I think the orcs are a great comparison. Let's look at the newer orcs. Do you see how ridiculous this looks compared to the other one? And again, I'm not trashing the artist, okay? I'm not trying to disrespect the artist in any way. I just think that the intentions are clear, because the tone of this book will likely also be very cartoonish. There will probably be some silly here and there, but overall, like, okay, I think I did read this book. If it is the book that I'm thinking of, no, it's a different book. I haven't read this one, never mind. I was thinking of the recent book about Fulgrim that came out. It wasn't even about Fulgrim. Fulgrim was barely even in it. But I have indeed read a bunch of these books, okay? I just want to preface it by saying that I've read, for example, Lazarus. You know, I thought it was an enjoyable sort of run-of-the-mill kind of book. Nothing crazy, no big revelations. Doesn't seem nearly as impactful as I would like it to be, but you can tell how cartoonish this looks compared to that. And I don't even want to go into John Blanche. I also love John Blanche's art. But, I mean, even if some of this stuff, this is obviously very old school, right? But even if some of this stuff, like the proportions and the anatomy, looks silly, it also looks serious. It also looks like someone, again, took care and attention to create this. And personally, I do find this terrifying, and I think that is right. I think it is good to be terrified of this, even if it is silly or campy, okay? There's nothing wrong with campiness. You could argue the Hellraiser movies are campy, but you can still find them scary. You can still clearly see that there is terrifying undertones behind them. Whereas nowadays, more and more in newer Warhammer stories, I can feel some of the seriousness fading away. And so yeah, I've been talking mainly about the art, but now I actually want to talk about the stories, okay? So I will talk to you about some of the stories that I've been reading lately. I've read a bunch of these. Okay, first of all, let me just... Do I have to say it? Do I have to explain why this is an odd choice of design for that character? I know that character is apparently all over the place nowadays, even though no one seems to have read their book, Harem Master, whatever. First of all, that's a female Space Marine. I don't care what you say. Again, I'm not criticizing the artist, but what the hell is that? Second of all, Mike Brooks is an author that I do not particularly like, because he doesn't seem to like the setting of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And third, do I really have to make that comment about the design of the character, where the entire Legion is supposed to look exactly like their Primarch, to the point that they can be confused with the Primarch, to the point that it is always interesting. It can be certainly goofy at times or overdone, but you never know whether you're talking to just a regular Legionnaire in the Heresy or a Space Marine or the actual Primarch. And that's the cool thing about the Alpha Legion, like, you can never be 100% sure about something, even though, once again, I think it's certainly overplayed. But I don't even want to read this book, firstly because I don't want to support Mike Brooks, because he clearly doesn't want to support the setting that I fell in love with. But also, I mean, look at the art there, okay? Then, this story here. I am currently in the process of reading the second book of this trilogy, and I think it has some cool moments, and that will be a recurrent issue. But some character, like with some of these stories that I will be talking about, but some of these characters absolutely spoil it for me. Again, just the way they're presented, they seem cartoonish. There's not a lot of complexity to them. Take this main character here, the woman at the front. She's described as this woman, sorry, that's basically stronger than any. Not necessarily. I'm exaggerating a bit, but this female boss, pretty much. She's cool in the way that she's extremely zealous and fanatical, and the Inquisitor in the background, he's more jaded. He's like 200 years old, probably. I think his name is like Cazador, I think he was. I don't know, something Hispanic sounding. And, very laid back Inquisitor, kinda cool, kinda chill guy, but there is not a lot of tension in this whole story. And the things that I won't talk about the actual story, but I won't spoil the story because it has incredibly massive implications to the universe of Warhammer. The things that happen in this trilogy, at least up to the second book that I've been reading. And I stopped reading the second book in the trilogy about 6 months ago. I'm fully intent to go back to it at some point. Sorry about that. But I stopped reading because there was no tension. I couldn't feel any of the tension. I felt like the characters were there to talk about themselves and to say, oh, I'm a character like this, and I do that, and then I do that. The cool thing about Warhammer is you can forgive the twisted actions. Like with our present morality, a lot of the characters in 40k are like morally completely twisted. They're monsters. They've lost a lot of their humanity, but in the fictional universe of the 41st millennium, you can sort of forgive that because you understand that these characters are kind of almost, well, how can I put this? They make a very little impact in the grand scheme of things, The story is not about them. The story is about the horror of the galaxy and the horror that humanity has to face. And, their actions may cost them their life. Their stoicism, their heroicism will cost them their life, and maybe it will tip the scales like barely at all. But that's kind of what's cool, right? The hopelessness of it. In this trilogy, I got the feeling like it was more about the characters, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the characters were not interesting. That's the issue, right? It was more interesting what was happening in the background, the actual implications, which are massive. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but trust me, they're world-changing. And I am fully open if that's what we're gonna go with. They're completely lore-changing, by the way, and setting-changing. Which is scary because as a setting that was stale for a long time, it is scary when big changes like that come, but at this point so many changes have come that it's hard to even keep track of them. The setting's moving forward so fast that not even GW or Black Library finishes all their storylines realistically. But specifically in this story, let's take for example the first book in the trilogy. There is an incredible reveal, a massive reveal, a terrifying reveal, a very heretical reveal. And I still felt like the book was about the characters, and the characters were just not interesting enough. Take Archmagos, for example, another book with some... again, I have a review on this book, so I won't talk on the channel, so I won't talk too much about it here. But first of all, this character is incredibly cartoonish. And you can tell by the art how little serious this character is. Again, I hate to compare artists. This is not what I'm doing. Let's say I'm comparing tones, okay? I show you that previous art of the Mechanicum by Adrian Smith, right? Look at this. I have to show a comparison so that you understand, because perhaps some of you, if you just, of course I'm talking into the void, right? Because people nowadays look at AI art and they think it's amazing art. So I'm obviously, it's a time where like it's an age where the things I'm saying will not land with everyone. find will not easily find an audience because we have become so accustomed to slop. But look at these Necrons, okay? I wish I could zoom this more. Maybe I can. Give me a sec. Yeah. Look at these Necrons, alright? Look at their faces. Look at their eyes. Mind you, I'm hyper zooming this image, okay? Look at all the detail in there. Look at the evil in their soulless, remorseless, hollow eyes. And then look at the Silent King himself from the last novel in the long as hell series of novels known as the Dawn of Fire series, which I read all of it. And again, I wish there was an easier way to zoom in on this, but a less janky way to zoom in on this. But look at their faces. That looks like that belongs in the back of a cereal box. I guess these are maybe a little better, but realistically I also thought the book was kind of, you know, for the book that's supposed to be ending an entire series of like 7 or 8 or 9 books probably, I felt like it was completely meh. I just don't know what these books are saying anymore. I don't quite understand what they're trying to do. I feel they make me feel even kind of dumb. Like there's something that I was supposed to know that I didn't. Kind of like, okay, they feel like Marvel movies. You know how nowadays, if you haven't watched like the last 30 Marvel movies and the last 15 Marvel TV shows, and then one of your friends is like, hey, you want to see the new movie about the whatever and the whatever? I don't even know what they're called anymore. The Thunder Birds or whatever they're called now. I don't know what we're doing anymore because I was never like huge into Marvel comics, to be honest. And you go, and if you're not like invested in like all the story up to this point, it feels kind of meh, kind of slop. And your friend's like, oh, but you don't get it. See that character that showed up for one scene? You know, he was in that other movie about this. I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't watch that movie. It's not interesting here. Okay, it's like that. But the difference is I read this entire series, like novel, and I know that there are very like huge implications to the lore in this novel because I know a lot about the lore. I'm an absolute disgusting, filthy, autistic nerd about Warhammer lore. And I just couldn't care all that much. Again, there were parts that I really enjoyed about this book. But the biggest reveals, I think, in this book is one of those funny examples where I actually liked the characters more. I thought the characters were actually more interesting than the story itself. Why not find a balance? I felt like there was an entire series of books about this that I should have read to understand what they were going for. But the thing is, every single book in this series made me feel that way. And I liked some of those books, by the way. I really enjoyed some of those books. Okay. This book here. Fulgrim, The Perfect Son. This is not a review of the book. I just want you to look at the art of Fulgrim. Okay, that is supposed to be a demigod. A son of the Emperor of Mankind. A Primarch. One of the most perfect Primarchs, actually. One of the most beautiful Primarchs. One of the most... I don't know. Attractive Primarchs in any way. That people just felt magnetically attracted to. Some people, not everyone. Back in the Great Crusade days, while the Emperor still walked amongst his followers in the Imperium of Man. But the cool thing is that when all that beauty falls to chaos, it becomes terrifying, right? That's that's the tragedy of things. Let's go back to let's talk about John Milton's Paradise Lost, for example. The true tragedy of Lucifer is how beautiful he was, how smart he was, how eloquent he was, and that becomes very tragic and also very terrifying when he falls from grace, right? That's what Fulgrim should have been. I don't think this is terrifying. I think he looks kind of silly with that blocky, kind of ugly, spidery looking armor. It looks like something from World of Warcraft. And, I've mentioned World of Warcraft before and how it changed. But I fear that Warhammer is about to get the World of Warcraft treatment very soon. And it's already been happening. Anyways, I didn't talk too much about the Fulgrim book, because this book isn't even about Fulgrim. This is literally just Black Templar propaganda, and I love the Black Templars. But I bought this book, I paid what I consider way more money than I should have for this book, and I couldn't finish listening to it because I could not care enough about what's going on. Because I thought it was gonna be at the very least a cool story about an Emperor's Children Space Marine, an Emperor's Children Legionnaire turned to chaos. And whenever that's done right, that is, I think it was in the novel Scars in the Heresy. One of the main characters is actually an Emperor's Children, and I thought he was rad AF. I thought he was cool AF. And even though he was the antagonist, and he was also a very tragic character in his own way. Here I just couldn't care about them. This was just a filler book. I could have read this again in the back of a White Dwarf magazine, everything that happens in this novel, and I would have probably enjoyed it more because I would have spent less money on it, and it would have taken me a lot less time and effort to get through, and I couldn't even get through it. I stopped like 30 minutes before listening, 30 minutes before the novel was over, which is worse. Okay, it makes it so much worse. If I had heard it for 10 minutes or 2 hours, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not listening to another 10 hours of this. Well, then yeah, I made my choice fairly early. No, I put myself through it as much as I could, and there was like a few very cool moments, but I am also sort of a very gullible person, so I don't know if I thought those moments were cool because I am so in love with this universe, and my brain, my imagination, my amazing imagination did all the work. Because, well, I'm not saying I have an amazing imagination. I'm saying my ability to imagine things is astounding. I'm constantly imagining things. I'm constantly picturing cool stuff in my brain. Alright? It's awesome in there, by the way. Sometimes it's scary, but that's besides the point. I digress. I don't know if I'm doing all the heavy lifting for these authors, okay? I don't know Jude Reed as an author. I have to look into more of their novels. There's a couple of cases, a couple of authors here where I read a book from them, like it is the case, with the author who made that book about the exorcists. Right now I am currently reading the Carcharodon trilogy as well. And I'm on the second book, and I'm having such a hard time. This is not the second book, by the way. This is not the book I'm talking about. But it is by Robbie McNiven. So it is the same author. I mean, look at the artwork. Again, I am not crapping on the artist. I'm crapping on the choice to hire that artist. For these specifically. This looks like a Marvel comic. Oh my god, he has a blood drop in his hand. Whoa. Oh look. His shoulder pauldron has some bullet holes. Oh, scary. Oh look, his axe is big and it has teeth because it's a chain axe. Oh, this is Shar. Sorry, this character's name is Shar. He is the Reaper Prime. This guy is in charge of whenever the Carcharodons are running low on humans, on bodies, which are just resources to them, both in like aspirants or initiates for their Space Marine chapter, as just slaves, because this is a chapter that captures slaves whenever they're in need of that. It's the Reaper Primes, this character Shar. It's his duty to go into a world and enslave as many people as he needs to. Not nicely recruit them, not twirl his mustache and be like, I'm gonna enslave the world. No, he'll deploy his entire company or whatever forces are at his command down into the world and forcibly, violently take the people as resources that he needs to become their slaves, and the worthy ones, the lucky ones, will become Carcharodon Space Marines. And I say lucky because it's not very lucky. Now, the Carcharodons are a Space Marine chapter that it's not arbitrarily violent to civilians. They are very careful and very deliberate of when, how, and where do they strike, do they commit acts of violence. But take, for example, I don't know, this little conflict known as the Badav War, where the Mantis warriors, and this all has a purpose, by the way, this whole rant I'm going into, the Mantis warriors are fighting a guerrilla warfare against incredible odds, against a larger enemy force, and they're like, okay, you know, we are guerrilla war experts, we have the amazing gene seed of Jagatai Khan and his blood running through our veins, so we are great at hit and run attacks, so let's just do our thing. And they do for a long time, and they're absolutely great at it. So in these different worlds, throughout different worlds, the Mantis warriors, they are just owning the loyalists, so to speak, even though the Mantis themselves were kind of loyalists, but you know, that's the tragedy of the Badav War anyways. And the Mantis warriors are just doing their thing, you know, guerrilla warfare, and then the Carcharodons come and it's like, oh, really? So you're only gonna try to like pull our forces into the specific areas where you want us to fight? Okay, how about no? How about we kill every civilian that we find? How about we destroy every single city that we come across? And we kill as many helpless people as we want until you guys decide to come out and face us. That's who the Carcharodon Astra are. That's who the Space Sharks are, conceptually, as a chapter. And that's them being nice, okay, in many ways. What the hell is this face? What is this Marvel comic looking MFer? In the... I won't spoil anything off of it, but in the second book of this trilogy, the one I'm currently reading by the same author, oh, don't even get me started on Shar's armor here, by the way. This armor is supposed to be a relic, at least the symbol on the chestplate, a relic of the Great Crusade. Does that look like a 10,000-year-old relic in the world of Warhammer, the same world that Adrian Smith and John Blanche produced and showed? With so much detail and grime and dirt and blood. Anyways, I'm pushing it now, but in the second book of this story, I won't spoil anything, I won't go into details, I'm just making a point here using a tiny little scene from the book, or quite a few scenes. There are multiple instances of some former RBT's woman who has a grudge because she has PTSD from observing what the Carcharodon Astra do, and she shoots at the Carcharodon Astra in one instance. In another, she threatens to shoot one, and she threatens to hold one hostage, and she gives him orders, and he forces him or guilts him into helping someone else. Again, I could say a lot about this, but again, I don't want to go into spoilers. The point is, these are the mother effing space sharks the Carcharodon Astra were talking about. And this chick literally shoots at them, literally holds one at gunpoint, and literally forces them to help someone in need. And the Carcharodon Astra is like, well, okay, I guess I shoot then. So, is it becoming a joke? Is it becoming a Marvel joke? Well, the answer is yes. Now that I have established the issue, now that I think we have reliably established and addressed the issue, I promise you, we will talk about solutions to this issue. Well, the easiest solution is just go elsewhere. Find a different hobby while Warhammer goes into its Marvel phase, into its World of Warcraft phase, and let me show you what I mean by World of Warcraft phase. Okay, this is what I mean. Let's check on World of Warcraft back in the day, okay? This is 11 years ago. This isn't as long. To me, this is still new. Actually, this expansion wasn't even that good. I'm a Lich King baby. Wrath of the Lich King baby. But look at the aesthetic. Look at the characters. Alright, let's speed forward a bit. Now you can see why me, when I was, I don't know, when this came out, I was 19, 20 maybe, so I was already an adult. But I started playing WoW when I was 15, I believe, the first time, and I just became addicted to it, obviously. But I was a very, I was an edgy metalhead teenager. Very autistic, obviously, with some violent tendencies, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, these guys look straight out of a metal album cover. You see how scary they look in a goofy way? Of course, this is supposed to be like the proportions and the designs. They're a bit cartoonish, but that does not mean they're not serious. That does not mean they're there to be made fun of. That doesn't mean that there's no actual masculine values going on in this trailer. Some actual testosterone and heroism and sacrifice. And these are actually the bad guys in the expansion, so even still, check this out. Yo! That was some Zack Snyder stuff. Sorry, Zack Snyder. And yeah, those characters are actually like the antagonists of the expansion, so they're not even like the heroes. But how cool are they, huh? And the music, man, that theme still brings like tears to my eyes from back in the day, from nostalgia.
This was not our destiny. Times change.
Times change. Pick up the axe.
We will never be slaves.
Loktar Ogar!
We will be conquerors.
Yep. Okay, so that's how you sell an expansion, pretty much. That's how you sell your IP. Let's check on World of Warcraft today. And you might be thinking, oh, you're being stupid. That's not an expansion, a cinematic for an expansion, or a trailer for an expansion. I mean, technically it is, right? Because, the whole home building in World of Warcraft is an expansion on its own. But if you think I'm crazy, check this out. So this is the vice president, and executive producer, Holly something, for World of Warcraft.
Line. We want everybody to be able to play WoW. I will say this for myself. I think Warcraft itself is poised for growth. It's a fantastic IP. I think, in my humble opinion, it's been underutilized, and I just want to bring it to as many people as possible. And that means, evolving what Warcraft means, what it is, and where it's going. We want it to be approachable, and that's also part of it. Even with Chris Metzen, we talk about, sometimes he's like, man, I wish we hadn't called it Warcraft. It sounds kind of intimidating. Like, nobody really thinks that about Warhammer. It's an understood name, essentially.
Damn, I wish we hadn't named World of Warcraft World of Warcraft. Because otherwise, how can we make... why didn't we make World of Minecraft? Let's just do World of Minecraft, for that matter. I don't know what's going on with that IP. It's certainly a world that I used to love and enjoy. So, yeah, that's just for you, so that you understand what I mean when I say Warhammer is gonna get the World of Warcraft treatment, okay? But, as I said before, there are alternatives, right? So the first alternative is just leave the hobby. Leave for a different hobby. And I'm not a hypocrite, and I'm not gonna lie to you either. I've been looking into alternatives. I looked into Northern Exile is talking a lot about Conflict 47. I've looked into Bolt Action. I know people that play Bolt Action. I've looked into Trench Crusade. For X or Y, it does not capture the exact same magic of Warhammer. And funnily enough, sadly enough rather, the one game that I was looking into moving towards, I'm not getting rid of my thousands of dollars worth of Warhammer miniatures or anything. I'm not quitting my love for the stories that I have enjoyed throughout the years. I just was pushing myself to try out something else. So there is a game called Conquest by Parabellum Games, and it retains a lot of the world, I think, to me at least. It retains a lot of the complexity and the weirdness and the grim darkness of Warhammer, even though it's its own things in many ways. It will have things in common, but I also think it takes chances, it does new things, and I think it does them successfully if that's what you're into. Unfortunately, there's two things keeping me out from that game right now at the moment. The first one is the miniature scale. They are bigger, so they take a lot more time to paint. So I don't have as much time, and also they wouldn't be compatible with my like D&D miniatures, for example, because if I get into a fantasy game, I would like to be able to use some of those miniatures for something else, because I am cheap. I'm a cheap person. I don't have a lot of free time, and I don't have a lot of money to spend on these things. But that's just like a preference thing. I don't mind. The miniatures are amazing, I think. Great quality and very cool character design, in my opinion. It's growing on me. I didn't fall in love right away, but the decisive thing is I went to the hobby store, my favorite hobby store here, yesterday, and I asked the owner, who's actually the one who showed me the game for the first time, and I said, hey, I've been looking to get into Conquest by Parabellum Games. Are people still playing? And he said, you know what, a lot of people here have their Conquest armies and miniatures. It's just AOS, Age of Sigmar, just became big again, and since then people have stopped playing. So I just don't have as much free time as I would like to gather people together and invest a bunch of money that I don't have in a new hobby, in a new game. So what's the alternative for now? I've decided, at least for the time being. Well, I think that the best way for me to service my hobby, to service the universe that I love, the universe that I fell in love with, is to let the course of Marvel, to let the course of World of Warcraft run its course through Warhammer. But me, for myself, I will do my very damn best to keep the grim darkness of it, the seriousness of it. Oh, also the goofiness, obviously. Like, the goofiness is there. You cannot change the goofiness. Why? Well, because look at the Space Marine Poltrons. They're silly, they're stupid, they're big, they're dumb, and they're cool as fuck. I'll do my very best to still make it as mature and as weird and as terrifying and as grimdark and as heroic as I used to enjoy it being. Even while these things happen, while these things run its course, because I think Warhammer is a universe that has so much work behind it, it can still be saved. Unless, of course, they give it the Star Wars treatment and they, Games Workshop turns over one day and they say, all those novels, they're no longer canon, which is exactly what Kathleen Kennedy did with the expanded universe in Star Wars. But I don't think that's gonna happen. Games Workshop makes so much money out of people buying the old novels still. I would argue the old novels still sell better than the new ones, but I don't know. That's just my assumption, just because mainly the old novels are the ones that I buy the most and like the most. But yeah, what I can do is I can talk to people about the cool things that are cool to me in this universe, and explain to them why I enjoy it the way it is, and deep dive into it. And I'm obviously not a revolutionary in this. Like, for example, Luetin is the one content creator that always does this for me. Whenever I watch his videos, I feel like I'm watching a documentary, and like I'm watching a documentary of something real, something that exists, and that makes it so much more interesting to me, as opposed to, let's say, well, I won't name creators, but let's just say other creators that are just about the meme culture in Warhammer, that it's all memes for them. And to me, that's not nearly as interesting. I may giggle, I may laugh throughout the video if I find it funny, but yeah, if you build a world based off of an IP, a fictional universe, if you build it based off of look how funny that is, so cute, oh, look at the little dance, you see the little dance she makes, look, she's gonna make a little dance, wait, oh, she's holding the crown, you think it's gonna be something epic, wait, she's gonna do the dance, that's so funny, man, that's so hilarious. I can't get enough of this millennial particular brand of humor. If that's what you do, that's what you end up with. And the best I can do is just keep my content weird in regards to Warhammer, keep it honest, keep it genuine and exciting. I try to create the content that I would find exciting. I make these videos because I would watch the videos. I make the type of videos that I would like to watch. I make the type of Warhammer drawings that I would like to see other people draw and make, and that's what I do this. So that's my alternative to surviving the upcoming wave of Toonhammer. And I believe I said this earlier, but just a disclosure, a disclaimer, sorry, not disclosure. Been watching too many UFO videos. Just a disclaimer. I know that kids are into this hobby. Okay, the other day I had this very cool moment where I walked into a Games Workshop store. I didn't buy any miniatures or anything. I just wanted to look what was going on and at some different paints and compare prices. But anyways, and I saw this mom sitting down with her kid, and they were playing with the manager, painting, sorry, with the manager. The manager was teaching them stuff, and the mom saw that I grabbed some paint, and she made a comment like, "Oh, why are you grabbing paint if there's like plenty paint around here?" And I told her like, "Oh, well, I like to paint at home because that way I spend more time with my wife while I'm also painting, and she's also into painting. Whatever. The conversation is not important. The cool thing is I could see a mom bringing her very young kid, probably 6 or maybe 10 years old at most, into the hobby. And the kid was gladly painting away his first Space Marine. And I thought that was very cool. I also understand why you perhaps would not want that 10-year-old kid to be exposed to this. Okay? I am not obtuse about that. I think that things can be introduced to people with but like we can be sensible about how we introduce things to young people. You know, when I was 8 years old, my stepfather at the time introduced me to a bunch of heavy metal bands. And maybe he wouldn't show me the artwork, or he wouldn't translate for me what the lyrics were about, but he introduced me a bit to the music, and he didn't drop me right out at the deep end of death metal, doom metal, and black metal. No. He eased me into it. And some of the first bands that he showed me are still to this day my favorite bands, even though they're not like extremely heavy, you know? Like Iron Maiden is my favorite band, even though 90% of the metal that I listen to is a lot heavier than Iron Maiden. You know, it was my gateway band into metal, right? So I think it's cool that Games Workshop has gateway alternatives, and I think that's why they made the Warhammer Adventures series somewhere in here. Yeah, it's here. Warhammer Adventures. These are all kids' books set in the Warhammer universe. Okay? Okay. I don't know how I feel about this, to be honest, because I don't think it's my place to say, because I don't have kids. Okay, to me this is not Warhammer. I think probably if I had a son, I would probably introduce him to some other sci-fi universe until he was of age, where I can finally tell him like, okay, yeah, you like your Star Wars and so on. That was you thought that was cool. Wait till you see the real grown-up stuff, kiddo. I don't know. Probably wait till he's maybe 12 at the very least. I mean, I was looking at Warhammer art when I was 9, so like the old school Warhammer art. And I grew up just fine, didn't I? But anyways, the point is, I don't know. I can't say about this because I don't know what it is like to have a kid and to want him as a parent to get into Warhammer, but you can't because it all looks like this. So I can't say, but that's why I'm not specifically talking about this in this video, okay? My issue is when my adult novels start to look more like these. My adult orcs start to look a lot more like that. But anyways, I think I have said enough in this video. Just before I leave, I want to give very exciting news. Give you very, very exciting news. Because, look, let me make the camera box here bigger. There you go. Look at the size of that sniffer I got on me. Anyways, check this out. I said I was investing... Oi, quiet down, little guy. I said I was investing in a camera so that I could record and film some of my miniatures and some of my kit bashing and painting, because that is, to me, probably the most enjoyable aspect of the hobby. Just the creative aspect of it is not the only aspect that I enjoy, but it's probably what I like really lose myself into the hobby. That and the lore, I suppose. Gaming, it's depending who I'm playing with and which which game version we're playing, because I'm kind of dumb for rules and so on, even though I have all the books that I need. Anyways, the point is, I got the camera now, so I will 100% be producing that style of content soon. It probably will take a bit longer to produce because I have to do a lot of changes here in my studio, and I still have to figure out a couple of things. But the good thing is that very few people are watching and paying attention at the time, so I think it's a good moment in the timeline of this channel in its infancy to start making those changes and start incorporating new types of content. But that being said, let's go back to the topic of the video. What do you think about what I just said? Do you think I'm just, being an old man shaking his fist at the clouds? Or do you think I have a point? And if so, what would you do about it? Did you just walk away entirely from Warhammer or the hobby itself? Or are you looking into some other stuff? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. Any sort of little bit of help, of interaction, helps the channel, and it helps you to find the right crowd for my videos, because it's obviously very niche style of content. I said previously that I make the videos that I would like to watch, so yeah, it's obviously very niche, so I would appreciate all the help that I can get in the meantime. But that's it. So I guess I'll see you on the next one. Ad Astra, and remember, there are no female custodies.